Hi, I'm Daniela Necefor, and I have invited again Colin Lavering. Thank you, Colin, to be again.
You're welcome.
One another important topic. We have seen I have seen during my experience that what I name chemistry between a candidate and the company is quite important, and between chemistry and emotional intelligence, it's a very, very tiny thing, and they are very closed. So our topic for today is why emotional intelligence is important for a company. So Colin, we know that we talked before and have the same approach regarding emotional intelligence. We have seen that the companies which are well known as toxic companies, they have practical leaders with no emotional intelligence. But in the same time, I have seen people, and you have seen people, who they believe that they are very good leaders. They believe about themselves, they are very good human beings, but in fact they have a total lack of emotional intelligence. So can you define for our viewers emotional intelligence?
I can, and I'll do it in a very long version, I'm sure, by explaining it. But I think just taking the point you said about emotional intelligence, although it's been around for a long, long time,
Yes.
it tends to be something we'll talk about in a moment, I guess, post-COVID, how things have changed. But emotional intelligence is exactly what it says. The powerful part of it is the word intelligence, because
Exactly.
people, if you say to somebody they don't have emotional intelligence, you're questioning their intelligence, albeit emotional, not practical. So it is a very sensitive area, but it is, there's lots of sort of aspects of emotional intelligence, but it is that ability to have empathy. But and there is a big but. You cannot, like many skills, you can learn negotiation skills, you can learn selling skills, you can learn other leadership skills, but learning emotional intelligence and understanding what emotional intelligence, I think, is one of the biggest challenges for a lot of leaders. And it's about authenticity. So if I read a book about emotional intelligence and I'm not emotionally intelligent, I'm probably going to dismiss a lot of the stuff and say, well, yeah, I do this. Of course I care about my people, but in the practicalities, no, they don't. And the worst thing that a leader can do is to pretend that they're emotionally intelligent, because everybody around them and below them, if I can use that phrase, will see straight through that. So you can actually create a worse situation by trying to be emotionally intelligent. So you have to do it in an authentic way, otherwise it just doesn't work. But what is emotional intelligence? It is that ability to connect with people and to understand and to genuinely show compassion and care, while at the same time, still from a leadership perspective,
Yes.
still being an inspirational leader. So it's quite a delicate balance there, and quite a challenge for people.
You have to be very understandable with the people, and in the same time you have to be tough with the people if you need
Exactly. Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit risky. So how would you manage, for example, a crisis situation when you have to be very tough as a leader, but in the same time, let's go on COVID, for example, on pandemic, what was happening, and after this, because you have to push the business, and in the same time you have to show the empathy to the people. So how would you react as a leader in terms, for example, I don't know, you have to increase with, let's say, 30% the turnover of the company. So you have to be very hard, very tough with the people. But in the same time, you have to show empathy. So how would you manage this?
Well, I think the first thing is to go on one of our leadership courses, because leadership has changed. You just mentioned the COVID.
Yeah.
Leadership has changed. So
Yes.
if you're fixed on a leadership course and leadership principles from 2006, you're going to struggle. You're going to
Yeah.
struggle because COVID created, and Romania is a great example, of family orientation and traditions and value. There's a wonderful story about an Irish friend of mine who wrote a book about it, and I think he travelled around Maramuresh area, knocking on doors and asking people to stay the night and for food, just as part of this experiment. And I think there's only one place, because they'd had a death in the family that day, that refused him. So that says about that essence of Romanian culture, that care. I always say that little old lady in the village, she will give you her last tomato. And that's unique with this country, and that transpires into emotional intelligence. So, if you try to separate that, when you've got a predominantly Romanian workforce, 90% workforce, I guess, is Romanian here still, 95%. If you try to separate that, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. And it is, we talked about in another interview about, this sort of manager subordinate thing that was going on. I think that has evolved through COVID, and now people are much smarter than we take them for. They see through these things. They watch videos, they learn and everything else. Sometimes their knowledge of emotional intelligence is much stronger than the leadership in front of them, which makes the exaggeration of their lack of emotional intelligence even more. So I think, going back to what I said, that the ability for a leader to be emotionally intelligent isn't just reading about it. It's practicing it and being consistent with it, and the measurements of it are nothing to do with productivity or growth. It's about, like I've said before, when that individual goes home, what do they say about you? And I remember, years ago, and I've told this story many times, I was in sales, and I went to this, on this sales call. It was the middle of February in England, if I remember, freezing cold, because I like showing my clothes off. I wasn't dressed properly, I never dress, I always get colds and things. And I remember coming out of the corner, walking across the car park, and I was shivering with cold. And I was with my boss, and I just wanted to get in the car, turn the engine on, and get warmed up. And I got in the car, and as I've told this story many times, and his big hand came on top of mine. He said, "Before you start the engine, what are they saying about you right now?" And that was part of his sales training for me. It was about the experience. It was what people said about you. Like when you go into a restaurant, the reason we recommend our favorite restaurant isn't because of the tablecloth is clean, or the cutlery is clean, or the steak is cooked well. We expect that. What we don't expect is that je ne sais quoi thing that comes out. And I think the same with emotional intelligence. That's the measurement of success with it, is that visible attachment that you have with people. But it's a tough undertaking. It's not a soft skill. It's actually a hard skill in many ways.
It is, it is hard skill because as far as I have seen, unfortunately, in some companies, they are trying to name in management positions people who are tough but not so much empathy. And sometimes they are destroying their companies doing this. And I'm seeing this in big Romanian companies and also in corporate ones. And also what I have seen, there are people who really want to promote, and they don't take care about anybody in rest and in the rest of the company. So to be very honest, I don't like such type of promotion. I never like it, and I will never like it.
It's damaging.
It's damaging. But how can I avoid such people? Because we are coming at a point, for example, when we have in the company people with low emotional intelligence, but who are really good professionals, very good in terms of management skills, leadership skills 50-50, because this low emotional intelligence is going them down. But they want to promote, especially they want to promote outside of Romania at the headquarters. How can we avoid such person, or not to avoid, if we have them, how can we manage them? Can we manage their emotional intelligence? Can an employee, a subordinate, pay attention to you? How can they pay attention to you? Look, this guy, it's a manager, it's my leader, but he has no emotional intelligence. It's
Yeah.
a very delicate situation. How can we manage it?
It's a tough one. It's a tough one. I think when you look at managing or running an organization right now, the multitasking is incredible.
Yeah.
So I know people who have a title as CEO, but they're actually the operational director. They're actually the IT director. They're trying to do everything. What I also see is I'm going to go around about to
Yes,
answer your
please.
question. What I also see in companies is this sort of mimicking. So what people will do, if somebody is that tough
Yeah.
character and they bring somebody in to recruit, if they're a soft, empathetic, social, emotionally intelligent person, they may reject them. Their opinion of them after. Remember I said about after the meeting, I say, what do you think about Colin? Yeah, it's all right, he's a bit weak. I wanted somebody stronger than that. And so they go for somebody who's a little bit like them. They actually say it, or you remind me of me when I was younger. So what you have is a pack of wolves. You have it's a bit like a room full of very direct people. It's like, this competitiveness that goes on, or a room of very people-orientated, emotional people. It's kind of like, whoa, and I see that a lot in companies. So the point I'm making is that there's a role for everybody. So no matter who you are, there's a pivotal role. So companies need to look at their structure of their company. If they've got somebody who's a leader who's too distantly a leader, they've got a problem. What they need to do is to bring this level up and even be amongst them and have these key roles. It's like project management.
Yep.
So I want somebody like you in my team, because you're going to do all of that research and the stuff that I might find boring. I want you to do it. I'm going to be the person who's going to visualize and communicate this idea and be influential. And then we're going to have somebody who's actually going to remove the barriers, who's going to be a bit tougher and remove the barriers for us. And then you're going to have another person who has that deep emotional intelligence, who has the harmony of the team and the spirit of the team collectively moving together. That's 4 people, very, very different. But for a project, it would be an amazing project. So I think that's what's happening is leaders are too focused on thinking that they have to be. I'm not being unkind, in this ivory tower and being this leader, this stereotypical leader. Well, no, and I mentioned a couple of people before. One of them is no. Get the genes on or whatever, but be amongst your people, but tap into those different skills. The leadership is a collective leadership, not one person anymore. Look at the great leaders out there. The Richard Bransons and of this world. They get the accolade, but when you ask them, they give the credit to that leadership team that they have. That's the key, I think.
Yeah, so practical, we can say that having emotional intelligence in the company, it's a plus, not a minus.
It's a necessity.
It's a necessity.
If you don't have it, don't, if I say to somebody this, or me and you recommend this, don't come back to us and say, why do I keep losing people? Because we know that, I don't know what the statistic is. I think it's like 60% of the reason somebody leaves a company is because of their manager.
Of toxic companies.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's people nodding as they're watching this video right now. And that's why if they have to leave, they will reluctantly leave their friends in that company, but they will leave because of their manager. The money, and I know they say, well, I leave because of money as well. Yeah, that is part of the percentage, but the real reason is that manager. So it's a necessity.
It's a necessity.
You don't have even emotional intelligence is about authenticity. It's about honesty as well. It's actually being honest with somebody. And I know as a Brit, we've got this very bad habit of loving to be wrong. So the thing where you come in Romania, and it's kind of the opposite. But that kind of shows a bit of vulnerability. But if I did half of that, I would have this person who's honest, authentic. And I think that's what we need to nurture here is people to be okay to be wrong as a leader, okay to seek advice. And I had a sales team asking me about, how do we get meetings with people? I said, well, if you ask for a meeting, if you do the formal way, it's 50-50 or less than that. You know, it's kind of debatable whether you get that meeting. But if you say to somebody, "Hey Daniela, I'd like to meet you for coffee next week. I'd like your advice on something," very few people will refuse. And leaders can use the same thing. It's not to, and it's very important where they have these conversations as well. So if you're a leader like the one you were describing, you're likely to have a fairly minimalistic office, a fairly huge desk that's quite intimidating. Your visitor's chair might even be slightly lower than your chair. So when somebody comes in, how the hell, excuse my language, how the hell are you going to create empathy and emotional intelligence in that
You
environment?
create distance.
Even if you've been through the whole course. So don't have that conversation now. That's my advice, is go to a neutral ground where you have an equilibrium with that individual. Even if it's an intern and you're the CEO, create that equilibrium, and then you can learn more about emotional intelligence. Then you get to otherwise it just becomes a process and a lack of authenticity. And I'd rather you didn't do it. If you can't do that, don't bother trying. If you can't create the environment and be empathetic in an authentic way, don't bother at all. Just continue being that leader that you were.
Okay, good advices, and I think also we share the common view regarding the emotional intelligence. So thank you very much for viewing us, and for companies and also for the managers, leaders. I would advise to be careful of what kind of environment you create into your company, into your teams, because environment is very linked with the experiences, with the performances. So if you want performance, you have to take care of your environment. Thank you very much for being with us, and don't forget, till next time, whatever you do, do it with excellency. Thank you.